These are the cars running around Canada, working.
Работают.
FORD F-450 and Super Duty Lariat.
Super Duty Lariat.
Here, there is one skating rink in front, two skating rinks in the back. These are the two ice rinks that are put on here. What is noteworthy is that the car has an additional tank. Here he is with a crane. It can also refuel other cars. It has this one here. I don't know what it's called. The seat turns out to be for a trailer. The trailer can hook and pull. Here, the machine itself is them. It's like a truck turns out, but it turns out 4 doors. That is, in the middle it is very full-fledged, well, as if 4 or 5 people are fully accommodated. There is a lot of space. Well, there's only room for 2 people. At the back, he uses the tool space. Here's the motor. Unfortunately, I do not know what volume of the engine, but it is diesel. Here it is worth. It turns out he still has the unified state register. 2 batteries. The cooling system also has 2 circuits. This is one tank of the expansion system. Here is the second bowl from the expansion system. That is, the second circuit, if I'm not mistaken, it goes to the transmission. That is, the transmission and the engine are cooled separately. Well, I may be wrong. I do not know for sure yet. This question has not been clarified. Here's the front. It's very fun for the driver to sit in front, because of course there is a lot of space. What else is interesting? Well, of course the automatic transmission. So the man came to change the pads. I've already sorted it out a little bit. We are now waiting for a decision because the person hoped that we would put his pads, but everything went wrong as he wanted. Because the pads are worn into metal, metal on metal. Here's one shoe, here's the second shoe. So it turns out that the anthers on the cylinders have been torn for a long time, and the pashenki themselves are all rusty. That is, in principle, judging by what I get when a car arrives, they give me information about what to do with this car. And there was to change the pads and pump the brake system. Judging by this, a person knows that he has a brake fluid leak somewhere, but still hopes to change only the pads and pump the brake system. But I am 100% sure that if now we just have snow here, if everything turns out to be dry, then we would see that the brake fluid is flowing from here. That's why a person needs to change to brake calipers, rotors. Rotors are brake discs because there was, as I said, metal brake pad rubbed. Well, in order to change this, I will have to pull the half axle out of the rear axle. Additionally, I will need gaskets. Here. There you will probably have to top up a little oil. Look at what is in the bridge, according to the oil level. Here, what else is interesting? And interestingly, in most cases these cars have all-wheel drive. That is, if we look at the front wheels, we will look. Let's take a look here. Yes, there is such a bridge going on here, I don't know, it's not visible. The bridge. So there, through the system of crosses, there is also a distribution to the front wheels, that is, it has all-wheel drive. These are the features of the features in Canada.
Особенности в Канаде.
What else would be interesting to show you? Well, probably everything.
Наверное, все.
From this side, I have already shown. The pads were more or less normal in principle, but I can't push the cylinder back. Despite the fact that the anthers don't seem to be torn, there is most likely water there.
Не порванные, там, скорее всего, вода.
Well, these calipers seem to work in such a mode that water constantly gets here.
Постоянно сюда вода попадает.
Water,
Снег,
snow,
соль,
salt, everything else.
всё остальное.
Here,
Вот.
so, well, back to the analysis of Ford, which I told you about earlier.
Форда, о котором я рассказывал раньше.
What's
Что из
interesting?
интересного?
The interesting thing is that this bracket is attached
Здесь
here.
крепится данная скоба.
The bracket is fastened with two bolts, one bolt on top, one bolt on the bottom.
Так вот,
So here's an interesting thing I'm going to show you later, by the way, about the half axis.
вот, кстати, по поводу полуоси.
I've already got the half axle. Here it turns out that there is a nut that tightens.
Получается, такая гайка, которая контрагается.
Tray, ratchet, let's say.
Скажем.
Here it needs to be unscrewed, then the brake disc will get completely together with the hub, with bearings, with the rear oil seal. And only then it will be possible to unscrew the brake disc from the caliper itself.
Тормозной диск от самого суппорта.
When tightening, a special one is used there. Well, a special torque wrench, of course, and special tightening forces, so to speak.
Усилия затяжки, так скажем.
Here, the caliper itself. I have already unscrewed the brake caliper so that the brakes do not flow.
Чтобы тормоза не лились.
It appears I used such a clip.
Такой зажим.
Here's
Вот
what else is
что
interesting.
еще из интересного.
Yeah,
Щас
I'll show
покажу.
you. So
Так
let's
вот,
go back to how
возвращаемся
this
к тому,
bracket
как
is unscrewed.
откручивается данная скоба.
The bolt is unscrewed from below, of course, by impact.
Понятное дело, импактом.
The
Импакт
impact is
довольно-таки
pretty
мощный.
powerful. And this one will shoot anything you want. Here.
Вот.
And here's the top one.
Верхняя
The upper nut
гаечка.
stands next to the
Стоит
spring,
рядом
and it
рессора.
is simply
И здесь
impossible
подвесить,
to get up here,
например,
for
головкой
example,
и удлинить
with a
её
head and
просто
an extension
невозможно.
cord. At
Сначала
first
я
I used,
использовал-
I have a ratchet
У меня
424,
есть на
like this
24
key.
трещотка. Вот такой ключик.
I
Я его
broke
в
it as a
результате
result.
поломал.
By the
Кстати,
way, a pry bar is like.
Прей-бар это как бы.
I've
как это
already
на-
forgotten how
на
it is in
русском, я
Russian.
забыл.
In short, an extension
длинитель,
cord,
рычаг.
a lever. Here.
Вот.
It was
Он
also broken,
тоже был
but since
сломан,
I bought it,
но так как
it's
я
hair
его
wrench.
покупал, это gear wrench.
Hair
Gear
wrench gives a
дает
guarantee.
гарантию.
They sent me a new one, but I'm using this old one as well. That is, I, roughly speaking, brewed it. If there was an active part here on the new one, then now it is not active, but just under 90 degrees. And in order to unscrew this bolt, we have to invent such a system with such an extension cord. Here, that's how I barely pulled it off. He's still a dog. Well, in general, these calipers here, they are all put on Loctite. Loctite is such a special liquid. Here's the bolt. Such a special liquid. When you apply it, it is in a liquid state. You twist it, it dries up and turns into glue. That is, roughly speaking, to tighten you well, so that the nut does not accidentally unscrew. Such a liquid is added, lactates. So the joke is that when you unscrew with a ratchet, it's good. You tore off the thread. Well, rather, he did not tear off the thread, but simply tore off the puff, and slowly it turns out that you unscrew it. But if there is no ratchet, that's what you have to unscrew it now, so you need to sort of constantly rearrange the key. Constantly try to unscrew it. That is, it is up to the very last one. Until the very last one, it is always in tension when unscrewing. That is, there is nothing that I tore off and unscrewed with my hands. That's it. That's what I was talking about. The bolt has already been unscrewed quite far, but still I have to unscrew it with this lever because it holds the lock. No, lactate is kind of a good thing. This is used on the brakes. This is safety. The bolts will not unscrew, but when you unscrew it, when there is no such place normal, then it's just tin. Here. That's it. So, well, what do we have? I removed it myself. It turns out that the brake disc assembly turns out to be with a hub. It's being removed, just like I said, a control nut, such a ratchet. There is a bearing there. We pack it all. Lying, stretching the flesh. Moose also slots are closed with a rag so as not to damage. It means, and what do we see? There is an oil seal here. The oil seal leaks because everything is in oil and, in theory, even these brake shoes, as they are called, turn out. These are the brake linings for the handbrake or parking brake. They are all in oil. In theory, they should also be changed. That is, the oil seal changes, so the pads change, but they are assembled. That's when the caliper and everything else is already installed. That's the case here. Well, of course, the oil flows out of the bridge from here. When all this is going back, it turns out there is also a place, as it were, where the oil should be, and it lubricates these bearings themselves. So, when collecting all this, we either add oil there directly, if there is no such possibility to add oil there to this chamber, roughly speaking, into this cavity. Then we gather, and when we lower the car, we tilt it in turn.
Мы собираем все, и когда опускаем машину, мы по очереди ее наклоняем.
That is, first we lift one side, so that the oil from the bridge enters the bearing, and then in the other direction, so that the oil from the bridge enters the other, into the left or right bearing. That is, in both bearings, there must be a lubricant that. In principle, it will get there when the car starts to go, but so as not to be on dry, that is, we do it. That is, the oil must be at the hub bearing.
у подшипника ступицы.
What else is interesting? The brake disc or rotor itself is tightened with such nuts, also on Torex.
Затянут такими гайками, тоже на торекс.
This is on Torex, and they also sit on lactate. Here. And so, in order to change, it turns out, the brake disc, this is disassembled for everything, and now it is unscrewed. Now you can sort of try it. Well, not to try, but just knock it down, and that's it. Here. And then it's a small matter. All this is cleaned up and collected. Well, new spare parts have arrived. Here's the brake caliper. What is interesting is that the bracket that is attached there, it is sold separately from the original Ford, and it costs even more than a caliper, that is, a brake caliper. And another of the features, if we see such a yellow sticker, it says corner deposit, means that I have to return the old brake caliper. That is, we return it, and then some money is returned to us. It turns out new oil seals, new brake pads. These are the oil seals for the axle shaft and the brake discs themselves. The brake discs in the removed state look like this. Here they were up here I show. That's it. Now we will clean everything and install it in place. So, well, everything is washed. That was the part. We have a bath with kerosene. That is, it is washed. The seats are cleaned. We usually clean it with this kind of thing. It turns out that a stripper works on compressed air. It means that the bearing itself is also lubricated and additionally clogged with grease. We use this kind of lubricant for bearings. Despite the fact that it will be in a different lubricant, but it must be lubricated beforehand. The oil seal is new, the old one is knocked out here. Well, the bolts themselves turn out. They are also planted on lactate. As I told you, here he is lactating. This is a lactate of blue color. Here. Well, all of this is going to be put back now. Here too, the place under the oil seal was cleaned. Everything was lubricated. And the cleaned places, where this bracket will already touch. The bracket will also be cleaned separately. The places where the brake pads go will all be lubricated and collected further. Well, that's all assembled. Everything is tightened. Everything is in place. It remains only to pump the brake system. That's what else to clean the wheels, because sometimes a lot of rust turns out, which interferes with the correct arrangement of the wheels. But it will all be lubricated. That is, here the disc goes metal. That is, metal to metal one lubricant is used. Metal to aluminum another lubricant is used because aluminum gives a very large oxide. Here I can even show these lubricants.
Вот, но это все будет смазываться, то есть здесь диск идет металлический, то есть металл к металлу используется одна смазка, металл к алюминию используется другая смазка, потому что алюминий дает очень большой окисел. Вот, могу даже показать эти смазки.
This is the lubricant for aluminum, and this lubricant is used for antisis. It turns out that it is applied to metal against rust. That is, for example, I applied the same anti-rust here in this place between metal and metal. This is the lubricant we use for calipers used together where the pads. Guides that give the caliper the opportunity walking back and forth is all blurred.
В этом месте, между металлом и металлом. Вот. Такая смазка используется у нас для суппортов. Используется в месте там, где ходят колодки, направляющие, которые дают суппорту возможность ходить вперед-назад. Это все смазывается.
All in theory, the car is almost
Поэтому
finished.
практически машина закончена.